This is great fun for the first time, I think, in ever, actually.
Very
I think
long
since
time.
COVID-19.
Yeah.
We've got a newspaper editor who's joined us. Did you bring the coffee? That was always the rule. No, well, newspapers,
get off Zoom,
newspapers are over, I'm afraid. Good not to have you on Zoom, actually have you in person. Hilary Joffe from Business Day, good to have you with us. So we're going to go through the Star in a moment, but let's just start with the Business Day. And the one I've got here, I want to read the headline. You tell me what's happening, Hilary. SA breaks borrowing taboo for the sake of cheap money. Help Gareth understand.
Gareth, that's actually an inside analysis piece that I wrote, but we'd had that story on our front page on Monday. This is the World Bank loan, $750 million, about 11 billion rand. This is the tail end of actually our COVID borrowing, because you might recall that very early in the COVID crisis, when the markets were crashing and money was like racing out of the country, we did something we'd never done before as a country. We went to the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank and the BRICS Bank for money to support our budget amidst a crisis. And it was a big policy shift, because South Africa had always tried to avoid the sort of Washington folk imposing conditions on us. But the Washington folk were dishing out money with very little conditionality, and we were really, like many other countries, were getting cheap funding. Now,
It's
the World Bank
dangerous lending, isn't it? It's dangerous lending. It's irresponsible lending.
It certainly used to be.
Yeah.
It used to be, but no longer. And I think that the World Bank loan is sort of almost the last of those loans to come through. And my piece just looks at why would we want to do this. And one of the big reasons we need to do this to the extent that we can, and obviously on terms that we negotiate very carefully, is that it's very cheap interest rates. Very cheap interest rates, because the World Bank and the BRICS banks borrow themselves. You know, they get very cheap funding and they pass that on to us. It's cheap interest rates at a time when our government debt is costing an absolute fortune on the market. So if we go to the market, we pay a fortune. If we go to these Washington lenders, if you like, we pay very little. And what's changed in the last 20, 30 years is that the conditions are not one size fits all. They impose, they tell us what to do anymore. We commit to things we were really needed to do anyway, which we were embarked on anyway.
It just sort of expedited the whole process and things we committed ourselves to as well. So that's one of the stories that I know you mentioned from a couple of days ago now on Monday. But if you're looking for that, please go read it. I've now just I haven't had a chance to read it properly, but look for the opinion piece, SA breaks borrowing taboo for the sake of cheap money. That's the one story we're talking about.
Absolutely. But the other one on Times Live is South Africa slipping on a global corruption index there. Hilary. Yeah.
Actually, our whole front page at Business Day is rather depressing, I have to tell you. It's kind of one alleged corruption story after another. We've got the SIU probe into those PPE procurement scandals. We've got a new probe actually into wasteful spending at Telkom, which is, I don't know where that came, what prompted that one. It goes back quite a long way. We've got that South Africa has slipped one place to number 70 out of 180 countries on the corruption index. And I think the point that the business story makes is that South Africa hasn't moved. You know, the Zuma years we sort of plummeted, and we keep sliding.
Right.
So I think the picture of abuse of public funds is very centre stage at the moment, and one we have to take seriously. Not just getting people into orange overalls, so that is... Prosecuting people is obviously a huge issue, but also I don't know if we're looking enough at what is it about government's own processes and procedures that seems to enable this or breed this kind of activity.
Can we talk about getting people into orange overalls for a moment? Sorry, it feels like you're watching tennis, isn't it? You're going right and left, right and left. Sorry about that, Hilary. So you mentioned orange overalls. Let's move away from the Business Day for the moment as well, and just bring up the Star. Orange overalls. The one headline we're looking at, COVID-19 tender fraudsters in the eNCA crosshairs. I think a lot of people are surprised to see these sort of headlines, because South Africans, being pessimistic, because we are, wouldn't have thought anything's going to happen to any kind of COVID-19 malfeasance or fraud for years to come. But here we are with the President saying that this NPA, or the National Prosecuting Authority investigation, is starting to reap rewards quite quickly. It's good news, I think.
So we hope.
So we hope.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Look, I think, well, there are two things that need to happen. I think one is that some of these departments have launched disciplinary processes, or should have launched, against the staff members and officials who perpetrated the corruption, because some of those people are still in place. I mean, we've seen the president's former spokesman, Kusela Diko, leave her post because her husband is implicated in these PPE scandals. So internal processes need to happen, but obviously also we need proper prosecutions. And I think at this point the NPA needs to really show evidence that of the whole host of corruption probes that it's busy with, and it really does have a lot on its plate, it certainly needs to pick one or two cases it can win and win them, because we need that signal.
I mean, the criticism has been, Terms, hasn't it, as we start saying goodbye to Hillary, that they're just, the NPA isn't staffed up enough. That's the problem. So they know what to do. Perhaps you can tell me what you think, Hillary. They know what to do, but they just don't have the staffing, the numbers behind getting it done efficiently and getting it done in a way that's not going to end up with counter court cases the whole time, because they're understaffed, aren't they?
I think some of these cases are complicated, and the whole series of cases that are going to come out of the Zondo Commission, there's a wodge of evidence there which they can draw on.
And there's still part 2 and 3 coming out.
And there's part 2 and 3, and it's kind of deep forensic stuff, some of it. And yes, it does need skills. The private sector has actually offered to second skills to the NPA, which, as I understand it, turned down.
That's correct.
But I think it also needs some decisiveness and some action.
Well, hopefully we get that. Hillary, good to have you on the show with us in person, non-Zooming. I think that's what we're going to call these interviews in person, non-Zooming interviews. Hillary, thank you for coming in. Hillary Joffe from Business Day joining us. The one I want to go read after this as well on the Financial Mail. SA slips on global corruption index. It's horrifying just how bad South Africa is. But we appreciate you coming in to speak to us this morning.